Greetings and welcome. We are in Senior English, and our objective now is to spend a few minutes with the text Antigone, Sophocles' classic. And we want to look at this play now, applying the Aristotelian critique that is provided for us through his classic text, Poetics. Now, we've already talked a bit about the play Oedipus Rex. We've read it. We've taken a review of a few review questions over it. And now we're preparing for an examination where we will also include this classic Antigone. I want to begin, though, with Sophocles and his trilogy. He writes a three-play trilogy. That's important that we understand it that way. Oedipus Rex will set all of the events in motion. When you pick up the play Antigone and begin to read then, the assumption is you already know the events that have occurred in Oedipus Rex and Oedipus Colonus. So let's just review briefly. Oedipus Rex will, of course, tell that story in a... Aristotle was really interested in the unities of time, place, and action. What do we mean by that? You might jot that idea down and look in your packet if you're not familiar with that on page 1. What are the unities of time, place, action? See, I am assuming that you will have read closely the reading that I gave to you over Poetics, some of you going online to read the full Poetics, and you're taking explicit notes of the concepts of Poetics, where you will then hear about this unities of time, place, action. So important to him. What does that mean, unities of time, place, action? Anybody know what that means? All of the events that happen. For Aristotle, a play is only great if it has this unity of first time. That is to say, all of the events happens within what? Do you know what his time frame was? What for Aristotle was the time frame? A single day, a 24-hour period. So in other words, no Shakespeare play is going to follow the unity of time. Right? So Shakespeare intentionally violates the Aristotelian, dare we call it, edict or command of what makes great drama. See, Aristotle would look at a Shakespeare play like Hamlet and say, it fails in terms of the unities of time, for sure, time. What about place? What is the unity of place? A single locale, right, a single locale. So in other words, we're not going to have a play for Aristotle. We're not going to have a play that goes all over the place. Which I didn't really emphasize this for your critique of the paper that you're writing, because it's fairly clear that there aren't very many modern films that are going to follow the unities of time and place. What about unity of action? Now, what do we mean by that? The unity of action means what? A single series of events following a single narrative. In other words, there's one primary storyline, and it will follow then, now we're to this other part of the critique, right, of these ideas of Poetics. A protagonist. By the way, the protagonist is oftentimes mirrored as it's his or her foil, named the what? The opposite of the protagonist is the antagonist. That's right, the antagonist. And often we're going to see that. We certainly will see that very cleanly in Antigone, right? And the idea for the protagonist is the protagonist begins in some kind of lofty state, some kind of official state, high, we might say. And by the end of the play, ruined, fallen. That hubris leads to that hamartia, which leads ultimately to recognition and reversal. But by then it's too late. Another way to say this is, by the time the protagonist figures out that he's jacked, it's too late. There's no coming back. There's no fixing the problem. In other words, tragedy for Aristotle will almost always seem to conform to a certain kind of negative destiny. All right? By the end, the protagonist is always wiser. Always way, way wiser. So in other words, not so young, not so stupid, not so foolish, however you want to think of it. But it doesn't matter. The wisdom that is gained for the protagonist doesn't matter because the protagonist is jacked. It's not like the protagonist can go, oh, I see it all now. Now I can make corrections and fix the going forward. There is no sense of going forward for Oedipus at the end of the play. He's pretty much just a jacked, bunged old man. In Oedipus Colonus, we'll kind of see this, where he's just a jacked, bunged old man. Blind, helpless, crippled, ready to die, useless. Okay? We'll see at the end of Antigone something very similar. Let's turn to the play Antigone now. Antigone will follow the unities of time, place. Action will debate. Okay? To the degree that we're talking place, we know events occur off of the stage where we are, outside of Creon's court, but all of it's reported back to us by messengers. And the messengers are really important. They tell us things just like we saw in Oedipus Rex, right? The messenger comes on to tell us things as well. In the play Antigone, we will begin with a woman, one of the two daughters of Oedipus, who will speak to her sister Ismene and say, a command has been given. The body of Itacles is buried. The body of Polynices will not be buried. And by burial here, we don't mean under the ground. We just simply mean that certain kinds of ceremonial rites are performed over the corpse to allow then for that corpse soul to find its way into Hades appropriately. Okay? We can know a lot about a culture by studying two events that are performed over and over again. One, what happens at birth. Two, what happens when people die. Okay? And so we find out something interesting about these Greek people and this importance of this ceremony. Creon wants to make a point. And so he says, nobody gets to bury the body of Polynices. To bury the body of Polynices, execution by stoning. Let's talk about how that project works. They would put a hole in the ground that was right up to the neckline of the person to be stoned. The person was then placed inside of the hole, and then professional stoners would throw rocks at this person, making sure to not hit this individual's head. You did not want to kill this individual, you simply wanted to inflict the greatest amount of pain. Of course, while the rocks are hitting the body of the individual, the hole is filling up. Finally, when the hole is completely full with rocks, a large stone is then brought and then dropped on the head of the individual to finish the project. And you kind of get the picture here. You don't have to worry about a burial plot because obviously the individual is already, how's this one, say it politely, under the ground. That's stoning. And Antigone says, have you heard Ismene that no one's supposed to bury the body of Polynices and whoever does it will get stoned to death. Let's go bury the body of Polynices. And right away, Ismene's response is what? Two things. No, we can't do it, but why not? What's her reason? It's interesting. It's not because I don't want to die. What is it that she says is the reason why? We are women. We are weaker. Men make the laws. Women keep the laws. In other words, it wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be right. Antigone will just, she'll call her sister a wimp, and they separate. Creon is introduced. It is significantly important that we point out that for the Greeks, there was no question about who the protagonist of this play is. No question. Sophocles throws a curve by naming the play Antigone. Of course, the real protagonist of the play for Greek audiences is not Antigone at all. Okay? It is Creon. When Creon comes on stage, he is this really strong, dynamic king. He looks very much like the Oedipus character that we saw earlier. And he has a dilemma. He wants to try to control dissension in the ranks among his people. The way he's going to do it is he's going to make a spectacle. He's going to make a show of one person, Polynices. Nobody's to bury the body. The chorus in these plays will kind of serve as the collective conscience of Thebes. And they will agree. You're absolutely right. The job of the king is to keep order. By the way, these are ideas that I'm recommending you jot down with the notion in the margin. We'll come back to them with our study of Plato here in a couple of days. The idea of the king is simple. Keep order. Run the show and make sure there's no dissension, no fighting. We all got to be one big happy family and get along. To do that, Creon says, you got to have a strong king. He says, I am a strong king, and I'm going to prove it by making sure that nobody buries the body of Polynices. Enter the messenger who says, somebody buried the body of Polynices. Immediately, Creon is ready to go to the wall. Immediately, he's ready to go to the wall. Then, he discovers that in fact it's Antigone. important point here, and that's why you got to know the first play, Oedipus Rex. Remember how that play ended. Creon made a promise to the blind, broken Oedipus, who was being led off stage by Antigone, that he would take care of Oedipus's 4 children. Well, the 2 sons of Oedipus are now dead. He hasn't taken very good care of the body of Polynices, and now all of a sudden he has Antigone in front of him, and she is defiant. That's important that we note this. She is defiant. When we see her for the first time in front of Creon, she's like, yeah, I did it. What are you going to do about it? Stop all this yakking. If you're going to kill me, kill me. I don't care. A mention is made. Are you really going to kill? Not only is she related to your sister, of course, Oedipus' wife Jacusta is Creon's sister. Not only is she blood relations on a number of levels because of the ancestral relationship, but they also point out, your son is engaged to marry this woman. So we got more of this interesting family dynamics. Haman and Antigone are a thing. Are you gonna kill your son's fiance? To which his response is, there's plenty of fields to plow. It's an interesting and disgusting sexual allusion, right? In other words, Creon's got no interest whatsoever in saving Antigone for his son, Haman. It's very, very simple. Creon is in a very tough spot. A number of years ago, I was giving a lecture, believe it or not, on Antigone, when one of my students who was known to frequent regularly the office came into my room, slammed the door hard, slams his books down on the tabletop with a number of explicit profanities as well. And I was sitting over there on the heater, and I was just giving my lecture on Antigone, ironically, as he came into the room. I waited for everything to calm down. He made some observations about the blippity-blip principle, and then he just looked at me in defiance to see what I would do next. The class, of course, interested to know, what's McGee going to do at this moment? To which I made the observation. So I take it you're a little bit torqued off at the principal. Yeah. I said, well, that's okay. Because here in just a matter of days, you'll get to be the principal, and you'll know what it's like to be a principal. Now he's ready to hit me. There ain't no way I'll ever be. I said, no, you didn't hear me. I didn't ask you if you wanted to be a principal. You weren't listening to me. So I'll say it again. It's possible your rage has kept your ears from working. I said, here in a few days, you will be the principal, and then you can find out what it's like to be the principal. Now he doesn't know what to do, whether to explode on me, because he has a sense something's about to be said. And so I said it. I said, I believe that you live just 2 streets away by our local park, do you not? I've seen you walking in that direction after school. Yeah, so? So this afternoon, what would happen if, for example, you were walking by that park and you saw a couple of large 5th graders who were just wailing on this 3rd grader? I mean, just beating this 3rd grader up at the park. Just jacking on. And you saw it. And even the 3rd grader maybe looked over you with help me kind of look. Now I said, at this point, you got an option, don't you? Option A, you just kind of pretend like you're not watching it and just let this 3rd grader get the ever-living snot beat out of him. Or option B, you walk over to a couple of 5th graders and say, knock it off. My guess is, I said, given your character, you probably are going to walk over to a couple of 5th graders and say, knock it off. I'm a high school senior, knock it off, to a couple of 5th graders. But what happens when one of the 5th graders looks back at you, says the F word, and then hits the 3rd grader one more time right in the face?
Knock.
I said, at that point, you just became the principal. You just became the principal. At that point, you just became Creon. Do you think it's possible that parents have ever given a rule with the punishment to attend if the rule is broken, and the minute the rule is broken, the mom or the dad goes, oh, crap, that was a bad rule. But they are stuck in an existential moment where if they go, you know, I said rule X, and if you broke it, punishment Y would ensue. But now that it's happened, I'm going to go ahead and back away and say rule X was a dumb rule anyway, and I'm not going to keep punishment Y. I'm just going to let you know, it all go away. Well, it doesn't take long for you to appreciate that if this is the modus operandi for you as parent or authority figure, what happens very quickly in regards to the rules? Right. Yeah, right. New for just only this. In other words, they're gone. Right. In other words, even if it's a bad rule, once you've given the rule with the punishment to come, and the rule has been broken, the authority figure cannot so easily say, you know what, that was a dumb rule, and so we're just going to pretend like I never gave that rule, and we're just going to go, no. Do you think in your own biography it's possible that you once or twice were victim to a stupid rule where you violated the rule, but the authority figure in your life, are you ready for this, had no choice? This is the Creon existential moment. This play puts the audience in that moment where Creon is stuck. His son comes in. He says two things, Dad. One, I love you. I really do. And I want to make sure that you're a good king, and I want to support you. Two, what you're about to do with Antigone is just straight down stupid. Creon is outraged, and then we have one of those really disturbing moments that sometimes modern families have kind of had to endure, where the authority figure and the rule breaker are finally face to face. And then it comes to that moment where one of the two of them have got to back down. If neither of them back down, well, then that becomes a serious problem. Haman will say to Creon, his daddy, you will never see me again if you do this stupid thing. And he leaves. Our next entrance is Tiresias, the fascinating blind prophet, who will say to Creon, you are a fool. When he comes on the stage, you are a complete idiot. You need to take care of this business with the body of Polynices. Interestingly, Tiresias is not that interested in Antigone and the soon-to-be execution of Antigone. He's interested in the burial of the body of the young man who has been slain. Creon at first is defiant, but after Tiresias leaves, he decides he will take care of this. Irony of all ironies, instead of going to the cave where he's placed Antigone, he's decided to not bury her alive, but let her rot to death in a cave with a little bit of food and water. Instead of going directly to the cave to release Antigone, instead he goes and he buries the body appropriately of Polynices, therefore giving enough time for Haman to come to try to release Antigone, but by the time Haman gets there, she's already hung herself. So she's dead. And in the process of Creon arriving, Haman and Creon will fight. And Haman himself will take his own life, because he realizes he can't defeat his father, Creon. At the very end of our play, man, you talk about a broken man. Creon will come on stage with the body of his fallen son, Haman. There is some suggestion, if you read the lines of the play close, that he might go out to commit suicide. He is a completely broken man. In the meantime, Creon's wife, Haman's mother, has also killed herself, committed suicide, by virtue of the passing of her son. The entire sequence of events then ends in total destruction. Thebes is in a mess. And it begs an intriguing question. The question is simply this: who do you blame at the end of the play for all of the bad things that have happened, right? Antigone.